The vast Galactic Council gathered once again in the heart of the galaxy, a place where the most powerful alien races met to make decisions that would shape the future of countless worlds. Alien species from all corners of the galaxy, with their advanced technology and wisdom, sat around a glowing table, their eyes focused on a single human representative. The human was there to speak on behalf of Earth, but he didn't expect much. The Council had already made up their minds. Humans, the Council believed, were too weak and too afraid of war to be any threat to the peace of the galaxy. They were a young, primitive species, still struggling with their own internal conflicts, and the idea that they could become an intergalactic power seemed laughable. "We've seen it many times before," said an elder alien, a member of a race known for their cold intelligence and ruthless efficiency. "Humanity is full of fear. Fear of war. Fear of losing. They're no different from any other species that lacked the will to survive." His words echoed through the chamber, and the rest of the Council nodded in agreement. There had been many wars throughout the galaxy, and each time, the human race had kept to themselves. They had tried to stay neutral, making deals and treaties rather than engaging in open conflict. That, to the Council, was the clear sign of weakness. The human representative, a man named Captain Lucas Grant, stood silently, feeling the weight of their judgment. He was aware of the human history, filled with wars, struggles, and failures. But he also knew that humans had something the Council didn't understand, a strength that could never be measured by technology or sheer power. "The human race has shown resilience, even in times of despair," Captain Grant said, his voice steady but filled with quiet determination. "We may not be the most advanced species, but we're not afraid to fight for what we believe in." The Council looked at him, amused. They had seen many species claim the same thing, only to crumble under the pressure of galactic conflicts. To them, Earth was just another planet waiting to be conquered or forgotten. "This is pointless," said a member from a race of warriors, their long horns glinting in the light. "We've given humanity too much time already. Let them remain in their corner of the galaxy. They are not ready for the bigger picture." Captain Grant clenched his fists. He had heard this before. The Council's decision was clear, and it seemed there was no room for argument. Humans were seen as no threat, and the idea of humanity playing a significant role in the galaxy was dismissed as impossible. "The vote is clear," the Council leader announced, a tall alien with shimmering skin. "Humanity is not a threat. They are not prepared for galactic warfare. They are not a danger to us." As the meeting came to an end, Captain Grant felt a mix of frustration and defiance. The Council's decision was final, but deep down, he knew one thing the Council didn't. Humanity had a way of surprising the universe. The real challenge hadn't even begun. The Galactic Council had barely finished their meeting when the first wave of invaders arrived. They came without warning, a fleet of massive ships appearing out of nowhere above Earth. The aliens were known as the Zoreth, a fierce race with advanced weapons and a history of conquering weak planets. Earth, with its small population and lack of galactic alliances, seemed like an easy target for them. They had been watching humanity for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. The Zoreth's ships were unlike anything humans had ever seen. They shimmered in the sky, casting shadows over cities and creating a sense of dread wherever they hovered. Massive weapons mounted on their hulls glowed with a deadly light, ready to unleash destruction. But what the Zoreth didn't expect was the response they received from Earth's military. As the first alien ships began to open fire, Captain Lucas Grant was on the front lines, leading a team of soldiers in defense of a major city. It had been a normal day, until the sky turned black with the shadow of alien ships. The sudden chaos would have overwhelmed most, but not the humans. "Get to your positions," Captain Grant shouted, his voice cutting through the noise of sirens and explosions. He had been a soldier long enough to know that fear could either paralyze or fuel a fighter. He chose the latter. The human military, though outmatched technologically, quickly adapted to the alien assault. Humans had fought wars before, on Earth, within their own nations. They knew how to think on their feet, how to use the land, and how to work together in the face of danger. They were resourceful, always finding ways to fight back, even when the odds seemed impossible. Captain Grant's team was stationed at an old military base outside the city. They had only basic weaponry compared to the Zoreth's advanced firepower, but they had something that made all the difference: ingenuity. As alien ships fired energy blasts down on the city, humans responded with quick thinking and makeshift weapons. They used old military equipment, repurposed into anti-aircraft defenses, and even hacked into the alien systems, disrupting their communications and targeting systems. "We may not have their tech, but we've got something better," Grant muttered to himself, watching the humans below work together as a team. Despite the destruction around them, the humans fought back with everything they had. They fought with determination, not out of fear, but out of necessity. This was their home, and they weren't going to let invaders take it without a fight. The Zorath were stunned. They expected humanity to panic, to crumble under the pressure. Instead, they saw the humans fighting back fiercely, adapting to their tactics in ways the Zorath hadn't anticipated. The first wave of Zorath ships retreated, wounded but not destroyed. It was a temporary setback, but it was enough to make the Zorath realize something. Humans were not afraid of war. They were willing to do whatever it took to defend their planet. The Galactic Council, watching from a distance, began to take notice. They had been wrong about humans. They had underestimated their resilience. And though they may have written Earth off as an easy conquest, the universe was about to learn that humanity was not so easily defeated. The Zorath had underestimated humanity. They thought the humans would crumble under the weight of their advanced technology. But as the days passed, the alien invaders found themselves facing something they hadn't expected: the resilience of Earth's people. Captain Lucas Grant, along with his team, had been busy making adjustments to Earth's defenses. They had limited technology, but they had something that the Zorath could not predict: human creativity. Humans didn't always rely on superior tools or weapons. They relied on their minds, their ability to think quickly, and their willingness to adapt to any situation. In the heart of a military bunker, a group of engineers and soldiers worked together, creating makeshift weapons and traps. They took down old fighter jets, re-engineered them, and turned them into anti-aircraft bombers. The jets weren't as powerful as the Zorath's ships, but they didn't need to be. With a bit of human ingenuity, they could strike at the enemy in ways that the Zorath never expected. Meanwhile, Captain Grant led his team into the city, where the Zorath's forces had begun to regroup. The Zorath were trying to get a better hold on Earth's major cities, hoping to break the human spirit with terror. But instead of surrendering, the people fought back with even more determination. Grant and his soldiers set up guerrilla-style tactics in the urban areas. They didn't have the firepower to face the aliens head-on, but they knew the city like the back of their hands. They used the narrow streets, underground tunnels, and tall buildings to their advantage. The Zorath couldn't track them, couldn't predict their moves. Humans had learned how to fight in places where the Zorath couldn't reach. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Captain Grant's team set up a daring ambush. The Zorath forces had entered the city with their heavy machinery, expecting to crush anything in their path. But as they moved through the streets, they triggered traps set by humans. Explosions from old cars, debris falling from the rooftops, and even homemade EMP devices that temporarily disabled the Zorath's weapons. The Zorath were confused. They didn't understand how these primitive humans could be so unpredictable. In one moment, they were striking from the shadows, and in the next, they were gone, vanishing into the city once again, like ghosts. But humanity wasn't just fighting to survive. They were fighting for their home, for their families, and for their future. They had something that the Zorath didn't have: heart. The Zorath may have had powerful weapons, but they couldn't match the determination of humans who refused to surrender. Back in the Galactic Council chambers, reports of the battle were reaching the high-ranking officials. The council members who had once laughed at the idea of humans being a threat now watched with wide eyes. The Zorath had retreated, but not without significant damage to their forces. Humanity had shown them something the council could not ignore. As the Zorath licked their wounds and prepared for the next attack, they knew one thing for certain. Humans were no longer just a weak species to be overlooked. They were a force to be reckoned with. After weeks of constant fighting, the Zorath had realized one thing. Humans were not backing down. They had come to Earth expecting an easy victory, but instead, they had found themselves facing an enemy unlike any other. The more the Zorath attacked, the more the humans adapted, finding new ways to fight back. Captain Lucas Grant stood in the command center, looking over maps and reports. His mind raced with plans, but the situation was becoming more desperate. The Zorath were learning from their mistakes. They had regrouped, sending larger fleets and more powerful weapons. It was clear that Earth's forces were being stretched thin. There was only so much they could do with limited resources. "We need to hit them where it hurts," Captain Grant said, his voice filled with determination. "We've got to destroy their command ships." His team gathered around, each soldier focused and ready for the next mission. The stakes had never been higher. Earth's survival depended on them now. Grant had seen the way the humans had fought, and he knew they would do whatever it took to win. "We can't let them regroup again," he continued. "We'll hit them hard and fast. If we take out their command ships, we'll disrupt their entire operation." Grant's plan was risky, but it was the only chance they had. The Zorath's command ships were heavily guarded, and any attack on them would be met with extreme resistance. But humanity had one advantage. The Zorath underestimated their will to fight. The team quickly set to work. They re-engineered several of the old fighter jets they had repaired earlier, making them more advanced with the limited technology they had. These new fighters would carry explosives designed to disable the Zorath's command ships. It was a last-ditch effort, but it was the only option left. As night fell, the group of fighter pilots prepared for their mission. Grant watched as his soldiers climbed into their planes, determination in their eyes. There was no turning back now. They would either succeed or perish. But Grant knew that failure was not an option. Not for him, not for his team, and not for Earth. The fleet of fighter jets took off under the cover of darkness. They soared through the sky, avoiding Zorath patrols and using the cover of clouds to remain unseen. The tension in the air was thick, but the pilots were ready. They had trained for moments like this, and now they would put their skills to the test. As they approached the Zorath command ships, the first signs of trouble appeared. Zorath ships detected their presence and began to fire, but the human jets were faster and more agile. They dodged and weaved through the beams of energy, closing the distance to the massive alien ships. Then, with perfect timing, they released their payloads. Explosions erupted across the Zorath ships, disabling their defenses and causing massive damage. The command ships, once thought impenetrable, began to break apart. The Zorath forces, caught off guard and confused, scrambled to regain control. It was the first sign of weakness they had shown, and it was enough for the humans to seize the advantage. As the last of the fighters made their escape, Captain Grant couldn't help but feel a surge of hope. They had done it. For the first time in weeks, humanity had landed a decisive blow. Back on Earth, news of the victory spread like wildfire. People cheered, celebrating their small but significant victory against the invaders. But Captain Grant knew this was just the beginning. The Zorath would come back stronger, but humanity had proven something that day. They were not afraid. They would fight, no matter the cost. The humans' victory over the Zorath's command ships was more than just a win. It was a message. The Zorath had underestimated Earth's resilience, and now they were forced to take humanity seriously. However, despite the damage done to their fleet, the Zorath weren't going to give up. They were preparing for an even bigger strike. Captain Lucas Grant knew this victory wouldn't last long. The Zorath were angry, and they would come back stronger. The humans couldn't afford to relax. They needed to keep pushing forward. Back at the military base, there was a new sense of purpose. Soldiers trained harder, scientists worked round the clock to improve technology, and every citizen in the world rallied together to support the war effort. Humanity's strength wasn't just in their soldiers. It was in their unity. They had faced the impossible and were still standing. Grant walked through the base, his boots echoing on the metal floors. He couldn't help but feel proud. The soldiers under his command had shown courage beyond measure, and now they were ready to face the next wave. But there was something else that worried him. The Zorath were no longer just attacking cities and military bases. They were planning something bigger. "Captain Grant," a voice called out, pulling him from his thoughts. He turned to see Lieutenant Harris, one of his most trusted officers, walking toward him. "We've intercepted a message from the Zorath. They're moving towards Earth's moon." Grant's eyes narrowed. The moon had always been a symbol of hope, a place where humanity had first reached beyond their planet. Now, it was in danger of becoming a battlefield. If the Zorath captured the moon, they could use it as a base for launching more attacks on Earth. It would be a devastating blow to humanity's defense. "We can't let that happen," Grant said, his voice firm. "We need to get there first." The mission was set in motion immediately. Humanity's best pilots, engineers, and soldiers were assembled to face the Zorath head-on on the moon. The plan was risky, but there was no other choice. If the Zorath took control of the moon, it would give them an overwhelming advantage. The journey to the moon was filled with tension. As the human ships left Earth's atmosphere, the reality of what they were about to face settled in. The Zorath fleet was already positioned in lunar orbit, waiting to strike. The battle would be fierce, and there was no guarantee they would succeed. But if humanity had proven anything in the last few weeks, it was that they never gave up. As the ships approached the moon, Captain Grant gave the order to engage. A fierce battle erupted in space as humans and Zorath ships exchanged blasts of energy and missiles. The Zorath had the advantage in numbers, but humanity's speed and tactics made them a difficult target. It was a fight like no other. The stars above them lit up with explosions and flashes of light. On the surface of the moon, soldiers made their way to strategic positions, preparing for a ground assault. They knew that taking the moon would not be easy, but they had come too far to turn back now. "Let's show them what humanity is capable of," Grant said, his voice filled with resolve. "This is our home, and we'll fight for it." The battle for the moon had reached its peak. The Zorath were stronger in numbers, but humanity had shown that they were not a force to be underestimated. The human fleet continued to fight with determination, pushing the Zorath back from their positions. But there was still a long way to go before they could claim victory. Captain Lucas Grant was aboard the lead ship, watching as explosions lit up the dark sky of space. The Zorath were relentless, firing down from their ships and attempting to break through the human defenses. The battle was fierce, and time was running out. Earth's fate depended on this moment. "We're getting close," Lieutenant Harris said, looking at the tactical display. "But they've reinforced their positions on the moon. We need to make a final push." Grant nodded. He had seen the strength of humanity on Earth, but this battle was different. This was a fight for survival on an entirely new front. The moon wasn't just a battleground. It was humanity's last hope for keeping the Zorath from gaining complete control of the solar system. "Prepare the ground forces," Grant said. "We'll land near the Zorath command base and hit them with everything we've got." The ships made their descent towards the surface of the moon. The ground was cold and barren, with dust swirling in the low gravity. As they touched down, the human soldiers quickly unloaded from the ships, ready to take on whatever the Zorath had waiting for them. The Zorath had fortified their base, building massive walls and turrets to defend against the human assault. But Grant knew that this was their chance. If they could break through the defenses and destroy the Zorath's command center, they could cripple the alien forces for good. "We move out in 5, Grant ordered. "Stay sharp. We're going in hard." The soldiers gathered their weapons and checked their gear. The mission was dangerous, but they had come too far to back down now. They were ready to fight for their survival, for their future, and for Earth. As they advanced across the moon's surface, the Zoreth began to fire. Laser blasts streaked across the barren landscape, narrowly missing the soldiers as they sprinted from cover to cover. The humans returned fire, using every weapon at their disposal to push forward. There was no room for hesitation. Each step brought them closer to the enemy's heart. They'd reached the Zoreth's outer defenses, and the fighting intensified. Humans and Zoreth clashed in a chaotic exchange of gunfire and explosions. The Zoreth were strong, but the humans had one thing the Zoreth couldn't understand: a deep, unwavering desire to protect their home. Captain Grant led the charge, firing his weapon and directing his team with calm precision. They had trained for this moment, and now it was their time to act. The Zoreth's defenses began to falter as the humans pushed deeper into their base. Finally, they'd reached the Zoreth command center, a massive structure that loomed above them. It was heavily guarded, but the humans had come prepared. They set explosives on the walls and doors, ready to breach the command center and destroy it once and for all. "We've got one shot at this," Grant said, his voice steady. "We make it count." The countdown began as the soldiers prepared for the final assault. Everything had led to this moment. The Zoreth may have had power, but the humans had something even more important: the will to fight. They wouldn't stop until they had won. The countdown echoed in Captain Lucas Grant's ear as the seconds ticked away. His team was just moments away from breaching the Zoreth command center. The tension was thick, each soldier poised to carry out the mission that would decide the fate of Earth. Grant adjusted his grip on his weapon, his eyes focused ahead. The command center loomed before them, a massive structure guarded by the fiercest of the Zoreth's warriors. They had come this far, but now the hardest part lay ahead. If they failed, the Zoreth would control the moon, and from there they could easily launch an attack on Earth. "Get ready," Grant muttered to his team. "This is it." The explosive charges on the outer walls of the command center were set. With a flash, the walls exploded, sending shockwaves through the ground. The soldiers rushed forward, weapons raised, as the Zoreth forces inside the base scrambled to regroup. The first wave of soldiers entered the breach, firing at anything that moved. The Zoreth fought back fiercely, but they weren't prepared for the relentless attack of the humans. It was more than just a fight. It was a fight for survival. Each human knew what was at stake. They had come to defend their home, their families, and their future. Inside the command center, the Zoreth leader, a towering figure in dark armor, watched the battle unfold on a massive screen. He had underestimated the humans, and now he was paying the price. The humans had adapted faster than any alien race he had ever encountered. He had expected them to break, to surrender, but they had only grown stronger. The Zoreth leader turned to his commanders. "Deploy the final weapon," he ordered. "Destroy them once and for all." A hidden door opened, revealing a massive weapon designed to crush the human forces once and for all. It was a doomsday device, capable of wiping out entire cities. The Zoreth believed they could turn the tide with this weapon, but they had underestimated one thing: human ingenuity. As the Zoreth commander moved to activate the weapon, a figure stepped forward into the control room. It was Lieutenant Harris, a member of Grant's team. She had found the heart of the Zoreth base, the main control center where they coordinated their attack. Without hesitation, Harris moved to disable the doomsday device. She knew this was her one chance. The Zoreth were distracted by the battle raging outside, and now was the time to strike. She worked quickly, typing furiously into the control panel, disabling the weapon's launch sequence. The seconds felt like hours as the system hummed and sparked. Finally, she hit the final key, and the system powered down. The weapon was neutralized. Outside, the tide of the battle began to turn. The Zoreth, realizing their weapon had been disabled, began to retreat. The humans pressed forward, pushing them back with every step. It was clear now. The Zoreth were no longer invincible. Grant and his team continued their assault, taking control of key parts of the base. With Harris's success, the Zoreth's leadership was in disarray. The command center was on the brink of collapse, and the remaining Zoreth forces were fleeing. The humans had done it. They had taken the moon. Grant stood in the middle of the command center, breathing heavily. His heart raced as the sound of victory rang in his ears. The Zoreth had been defeated here, but the war wasn't over. They had won the battle, but the fight for Earth was still ahead. As his team gathered around him, Grant smiled, his eyes filled with pride. "We've shown them what we're made of," he said. "And now, we take the fight to them." Humanity had proven, once and for all, that they were not a race to be feared, but a force to be reckoned with. And the war was far from over. With the Zoreth forces retreating and the moon firmly in humanity's control, Captain Lucas Grant stood on the surface of the moon, looking out at the Earth in the distance. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Humanity had just proven that they were capable of taking on the most powerful forces in the galaxy, but there was still much more to do. Grant turned to Lieutenant Harris, who had successfully disabled the Zoreth's doomsday weapon. "You did good, Harris," he said with a nod of approval. Harris smiled, though exhaustion weighed on her. "Thanks, Captain. But this isn't over yet." Grant knew she was right. The Zoreth might have lost the moon, but they were still out there, and they would be back. Humanity had won a crucial victory, but the enemy wasn't going to surrender so easily. They had to be ready for whatever came next. Back at Earth's military command, preparations were already underway for the next phase of the war. The Zoreth would regroup, and when they did, they would strike again. This time, humanity needed to be ready, and they had to plan carefully. The soldiers who had fought on the moon were now back on Earth, but their work wasn't done. Many of them were tired, but they were also filled with hope. They had seen what they could accomplish together, and that made them stronger. The Zoreth might have had the technology, the numbers, and the weapons, but humanity had something they didn't: determination. "We're going to need all the help we can get," General Holt, the commander of Earth's military forces, said as he addressed a room full of soldiers, scientists, and leaders. "The Zoreth won't stop, and they will come back harder. We need to strike first, and we need to strike fast." The plan was simple but risky. Humanity would send a large fleet to the Zoreth homeworld to launch a direct attack. It was a bold move, but it was their best chance to weaken the Zoreth's hold over the galaxy once and for all. The Zoreth had underestimated humanity once before, and they wouldn't make the same mistake again. Grant was part of the team that would lead the assault on the Zoreth homeworld. As he stood in the war room, looking at the display of their target, he felt the weight of the decision on his shoulders. This would be the biggest mission humanity had ever undertaken. If they failed, everything they had fought for, the moon, Earth, their future, could be lost. "Captain," General Holt said, pulling Grant from his thoughts, "you've led us through the toughest battles. Are you ready for this?" Grant nodded. His mind was clear. "We have no choice. We finish this now, or we face the consequences." The plan was set into motion. Ships were prepared, soldiers suited up, and the fleet was ready to launch. The Zoreth had attacked Earth, the moon, and humanity's way of life. But now, humanity would return the favor. The final battle was approaching. It was no longer just about survival. It was about making sure the Zoreth never again had the power to threaten the people of Earth. As the human fleet prepared to leave Earth's atmosphere, Captain Grant gave one last order to his crew. "Let's show the galaxy what we're made of," he said, his voice filled with determination. "We've come this far, and we won't stop until the job is done." The future of humanity rested on their shoulders, and they were ready to do whatever it took to secure it. The human fleet was in space, moving fast toward the Zoreth homeworld. Captain Lucas Grant stood at the command center of his flagship, looking at the large screen that showed the path ahead. His crew was ready, but the pressure was heavy. This mission wasn't just about victory, it was about survival. The Zoreth had invaded Earth, taken the moon, and caused chaos across the galaxy. Now it was humanity's turn to strike back. The fleet was small compared to the vast Zoreth Empire, but the humans had something more important, the will to fight. "Captain, we're entering Zoreth space," the communications officer said, breaking the silence. "No sign of enemy ships yet." Grant nodded. The quiet was unnerving. He knew the Zoreth would be expecting them, but they had no way of knowing exactly where or when the humans would strike. That was the advantage. Surprise. "Get ready for anything," Grant ordered. "Keep your eyes on the scanners. Once we enter their atmosphere, we won't have much time." The human ships were sleek, designed for speed and stealth, unlike the Zoreth warships, which were larger and more heavily armed. The fleet was made up of the best of Earth's soldiers and engineers, and they had a single goal in mind: destroy the Zoreth's ability to wage war. As they neared the Zoreth homeworld, a sudden alarm sounded across the fleet. A massive Zoreth ship appeared on the scanners, moving toward them fast. The battle was about to begin. "Brace for impact," Grant shouted as the ship shook from the first wave of enemy fire. The human fleet fired back, using their advanced weapons to take out the enemy's front lines. But the Zoreth weren't backing down. Their ships moved quickly, dodging fire, returning heavy blasts. The space battle was intense, with ships moving at high speed, weaving through explosions and laser beams. "Captain, the main target is still ahead," the navigator reported. "The Zoreth command center is protected, but we can break through." Grant gritted his teeth. The Zoreth would not make it easy, but he knew they had to push forward. If they could reach the command center, they could end this once and for all. "All ships, focus on the command center," Grant ordered. "We can't let them regroup." The human fleet pushed forward, dodging enemy fire and keeping their targets in sight. Grant's hands were steady on the controls, his mind focused. Each move was calculated. There was no room for error now. On the surface of the Zoreth homeworld, the enemy ground forces had begun to mobilize. But Grant knew the humans had the advantage: technology, speed, and the will to fight. "We're almost there," the navigator shouted. "Prepare for the final push." As the fleet closed in on the Zoreth command center, the battle intensified. Enemy ships were all around them, but the humans held their ground. They were close. "We've come this far. We can't stop now," Grant muttered to himself, his voice steady, though the weight of the situation hung heavy. The fate of Earth, of humanity, was in their hands. The final push had begun, and there was no turning back. The human fleet was in the heart of the Zoreth homeworld's defense zone. Ships filled with Earth's bravest soldiers darted through enemy fire, their engines roaring as they pushed closer to the Zoreth command center. Captain Lucas Grant's ship, the Valor, was at the front, taking the lead in the final battle. "Captain, we're almost there," Lieutenant Harris shouted, her voice filled with determination. "The command center is just ahead. We can do this." Grant looked out at the view of the enemy's planet below, the Zoreth's massive fortresses looming like dark giants against the sky. The battle was fierce, but the humans had broken through the first line of defense. This was their moment. "Keep pushing forward," Grant ordered, his voice calm but firm. "No matter what, we finish this now." The Zoreth fleet was getting desperate. The human ships had torn through their defenses with precision, and the Zoreth commanders were realizing they couldn't win this fight. The Zoreth ships were trying to regroup, but the humans were relentless, attacking from all sides. Grant's heart raced as he watched the countdown to the final strike. The Valor was nearing the Zoreth command center. The ship's systems were damaged, its shields flickering, but it was still functional. The crew had been through too much to turn back now. "Prepare the final strike," Grant said, his grip tightening on the controls. The last weapon in their arsenal, the one that could take down the entire command center, was ready. But it was a one-time use, and if they missed, they would lose their chance. Final countdown in 5, 4, 3. The voice of the weapons officer echoed in the command center, and Grant's mind focused completely on the task ahead. He could feel the tension in the air. The humans had come this far. There was no going back. The Zoreth would fall, or they would all perish trying. Now, Grant shouted. The weapon fired, a blinding beam of energy streaking toward the heart of the Zoreth command center. For a moment, it seemed like nothing would happen, but then a massive explosion erupted on the surface below. The ground shook beneath them, and the command center was no more. The Zoreth's main control hub had been destroyed in a single powerful strike. The Zoreth fleet faltered, their communications breaking down as the command center's destruction sent shockwaves through their military. The humans had done it. They had won. "Is it over?" Harris asked, looking at Grant, her voice filled with disbelief and awe. Grant nodded slowly, his face weary but triumphant. "It's over. We've won." As the Zoreth forces began to retreat, humanity's fleet had done what many thought impossible. They had struck at the heart of the enemy's power and broken it. The battle for Earth, for the future of humanity, had been won. The human fleet began to regroup, the ships battered but victorious. The war wasn't truly over, but this was the turning point, the moment that would be remembered throughout the galaxy. Humanity had shown the universe that they would never back down, no matter the odds. Captain Lucas Grant stood, looking out at the stars. It had been a long journey, but they had done what no one thought they could. They had taken the fight to the Zoreth and come out on top. "Let's go home," Grant said quietly, his voice filled with pride. The fleet turned toward Earth, ready to return as heroes. The battle for the galaxy was far from over, but for now, humanity had proven that they were a force to be reckoned with.